The bumps and bruises don't feel so bad now. The Lightning have won the Stanley Cup.
What's going on, guys? In this video, we're looking at every single EA NHL Stanley Cup celebration for the past 20 years to see how they've evolved. As you can see there, we're starting off with NHL 2004. I think in a few months, this game will be 20 years old, which is pretty crazy. Honestly, the graphics aren't as bad as I thought they'd be. At least these close-up shots, I do think probably make them look a bit better than the actual gameplay. But you guys can see there the Tampa Bay Lightning winning that 2004 Stanley Cup. Now, these old Stanley Cup celebrations, I realized while recording this video, are super long. So I actually start to speed it up here. It's twice as fast as I think it lasted like 4.5 to 5 minutes, which obviously if we're going to be looking at 20 different games, Stanley Cup celebrations, that's just way too long. I can see the Stanley Cup there's definitely looked better, but not too terrible. Gary Bettman's knockoff there, I think it's also somehow better in the current game, even though I didn't think that was possible. It's kind of funny too, the Oilers there, who actually had them playing just because I think we did this in season mode. We're celebrating the Tampa Bay Lightning win the Stanley Cup. So I think they have fixed that, of course, in the new game. Pretty funny to see. And then, of course, right there you got the classic Stanley Cup pick. Now after this, they actually did something I thought was really cool. And they show the stats for your entire playoff run as well as each individual player while, focusing in on their headshots. So if you're always wondering, like, who is that guy in the Stanley Cup pick? If it's some created player, you'll actually see because they'll be, focused in on him. It'll show his name. It'll show his stats. This is a very nice detail I wish they didn't go away from. And unfortunately, they never did this again. So go figure, I guess.
And this game is over. Colorado has won the 2005 Stanley Cup.
And next year, guys, with NHL 2005 Stanley Cup Celebration, I decided to have the Quebec Nordiques win it as they kind of got screwed. As the first year after leaving Quebec, Colorado won the Cup, so really feel bad for the Quebec fans. Earlier, you guys, when I saw this close-up shot there of Scott Gomez, which again, isn't that terrible for really how old this game is. You can see them here going through the handshake line. Right there, you can actually see Joel Quenneville, and it looked just like him. So I don't know how we had authentic coaches back in. This game would actually came out in 2004. So how do we have authentic coach faces then, but not now? You actually have a Conn Smythe, trophy award there. We did not get that in NHL 2004. Stanley Cup still looks not the greatest. I will say a little bit better there than 2004. Joe Sakic, again, something about his face. I guess it's probably just more like 2D looking than 3D. You still have the home team fans there cheering for the away team, which I thought was pretty funny. And then, of course, they just kind of all go through here lifting the cup. Just like the 2004 Stanley Cup celebration, I had to change this one to double speed because just way too long, at least 4, maybe 5 minutes. Now, this one, instead of going in on every single player to show their stats, it's just kind of like this slow-mo thing, everyone's celebrating. Love seeing Paul Kariya there, though, lifting a Stanley Cup. One of my favorite players as a kid, maybe my favorite of all time, honestly. So that was cool to see. But yeah, this dragged on for so long, probably like 2 minutes of just those still shots.
The Senators have done it. They're the new Stanley Cup champions. The celebration begins.
First things first, guys, that's got to be the driest announcer I've ever heard for a team winning the Stanley Cup. And now you guys might have saw in the corner there, next here we have NHL 2K6, because for some reason NHL 06 is not backwards compatible on the 360. And not only that, but NHL 06 only came out on Xbox and PS2, whereas 2K6 came out on the 360 and PS3. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but as you can see, definitely a different vibe here for the Stanley Cup celebration. A shot of the fans there celebrating. We got Alfredson there and the Canucks shaking hands. Now, the 2006 actual winner, of course, was the Carolina Hurricanes, but unfortunately, in this game, there was no playoff mode, so we had to send through an entire season. Ottawa was kind of stacked, so decided to go with them. I'm not sure you guys saw earlier, too, there was like some dude with shades on celebrating. Right here you have Alfie lifting the cup. Kind of cool, they have like the mic out there and stuff. So definitely, like I said, a different vibe than EA ones. You got the player there lifting that cup. The cup looks probably a little bit worse than 2005. I don't really see any engravings or anything, but again, totally different vibe here from 2K, so just kind of want to share that with you guys. You can see they're actually going for a bit more of a skate there around the ice. Next year, guys, you have NHL 2007, or I should say NHL 07. Again, there was no playoff mode for this one, so I actually had to, pick a team that was stacked. I went to Buffalo Sabres there, winning the Stanley Cup with the goat head. They actually got matched up against the Detroit Red Wings, and again, I think this Stanley Cup celebration lasted about 4 minutes, so it is run on double speed here, which you really can't even tell. That's just kind of how slow they're going through everything. Lidstrom there shaking. I think Maxim Fanagainhouse handed the line. I'm not sure who that was. Right there you have Hasek and I think Ryan Miller, so two really good goalies. Again, you actually had authentic coaches. You might have saw there Mike Babcock in the handshake line. Chris Drury there receiving the Conn Smythe trophy. So some pretty cool things in this we got rid of. Stanley Cup there looks a little bit too white for some reason. The Stanley Cup's definitely, should be more gray, more silver. Gary Bettman's knockoff there. Still not looking great. random just long shot of the fans. Again, think how long that would be if I didn't have it, playing at 2x speed. But we do like these shots here, kind of close-ups there of all the players kissing the Stanley Cup. You got the captain there, and I think the actual Stanley Cup pick is coming up. And this one's pretty unique too. Cruiser there bringing the shot, but they actually have the goalie there with his arms around the cup, which I think is something you almost never see. And now next year, guys, we have the NHL 2008 Stanley Cup Celebration, of course, won by the Detroit Red Wings. So I had to show that to you guys. Now this one's actually the exact same Stanley Cup Celebration as NHL 09. So about halfway through, I'm gonna have it transition over, but pretty similar, honestly, to what we start seeing like nowadays, which is kind of crazy because this came out in 2007. So this is 15 approaching 16 years old, and you guys will notice it's very similar already to kind of what we have. I feel like they liked this, and they only started changing it a very small amount afterwards. So again, you kind of got the shots there, the handshake line, you got the captains, Crosby, Lidstrom. They got this NHL logo, the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, Zetterberg, who has looked better, but again, for how old this is, really, that's not a terrible look. And then right here, you got Lidstrom, now Crosby receiving the Stanley Cup there. Again, really, this is kind of what we're used to seeing, so I might just let this one play out for you guys.
Such a grueling journey. And when you finally get a chance to hoist the Stanley Cup, you might think players would be out of gas. The trophy actually weighs over 30 pounds, but when you get it in your hands, feels like it weighs about as much as a feather.
And another great tradition in the National Hockey League, if you're a player, you do not touch that cup until you have won it.
But it is this spectacle, raising the cup over your head, holding it in two hands, that every kid grows up dreaming about.
And now time for the traditional team photo. And ladies and gentlemen, your Stanley Cup champions.
Alright guys, so that was the NHL 09 celebration. Now you have NHL 10, and I think this is the celebration that was actually used for the longest time without any change. I want to say they used it for 5 consecutive games. Now, they do change one thing slightly, which I think you guys will see in NHL 11, and then after that, it's pretty much the exact same thing throughout. I don't think they change it again until next gen on NHL 15, but right here, of course, you have the Chicago Blackhawks winning their first of 3 Stanley Cups, starting out that dynasty built around Taves, Kane, Keith, Seabrook, all those guys. So right there you can see them in the handshake line with Philadelphia Flyers. Rip there to Ray Emery. Christopher Stieg here won the Conn Smythe Trophy. Not sure really how he did that. Maybe because I think at this point there actually was a playoff mode, so he probably just played one game. I think that's actually definitely what happened because otherwise there's no way it would have been perfectly lined up with the 2 teams that actually needed to be there. Now this was very, very cool. You have an on-screen ice projection, which is actually something they've added to the most recent games. So they did have this, was it 13 years ago at this point? Doesn't look quite as good, but still was in the game. And now here, guys, you have the NHL 11 Stanley Cup Celebration. I just started out at the end of the handshake line there, just to kind of show you it is literally the exact same, but you guys are about to see here the one minor change they make. And then, again, it stays the same until about NHL 14. But I will play through the whole thing for you guys just so you can see. As you can see here, instead of the on-ice projection with them lifting the cup, it just simply has Stanley Cup champions there with the cup. And then right now, actually, you can see on NHL 12, it transitions from the camera on the left to the camera on the right. Aside from that, nothing changed. So that's why we're in NHL 12 now. This, of course, would be the LA Kings winning the Stanley Cup. You got Dustin Brown there out to receive it. And again, guys, this is going to be the same for the next 2 games as well. Really no change here, unfortunately. I think Stanley Cup Celebration, for a $60 game, now more than that, is something that they could definitely change every year, along with a bunch of other things, even if just some small changes. But like I said, this thing stayed the same. We're in NHL 13 now, where the Blackhawks won, of course, another Stanley Cup in that dynasty. This one, I think, was playing against the... I'm actually blanking. Who did they beat in NHL... Who did they beat in 2013 to win the Stanley Cup? But now, guys, 2014, the second of the LA Kings 2 Stanley Cups. And again, we're just going to play this one out there. You can see the Stanley Cup Celebration pick.
Pages of newspapers tomorrow everywhere.
Gary, millions of people have posed with the cup, but there's only one picture these guys will remember.
And I had to Google it, guys, but it was Boston Bruins to Chicago 1. But right there, you guys can see classic, Stanley Cup pick there. Really nothing too crazy. Now, we're moving on to NHL 15. Of course, this is jumping to next gen. NHL 07 actually was the first jump to next gen. Earlier on, I should have mentioned, but I think this is also the first game where you have the NBC package. You also have the Ignite engine for the first time. So Game definitely looks much, much better. And they hold on to this Stanley Cup celebration, I think, for the next 3 games, 15, 16, 17. I think I liked this one better, though. Again, obviously, it probably has to do with the better graphics, but we have the Blackhawks there, winning their 3rd of 3 Stanley Cups in said dynasty. We're going to transition here to NHL 16. So again, you have Fleury coming out to win the Conn Smythe. This is exactly what happened in the last one. I think Crawford might have won this Conn Smythe actually when I was recording. San Jose there, twirling their towels. Of course, this is the first of 2 back-to-back cups for the Penguins. So Crosby's out there with the knockoff Bettman. I feel like they've really never done a good job of making a guy look like Gary Bettman. Maybe they're not allowed to. I think that's kind of like the only thing that makes sense. Look at that. Stanley Cup champion, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, Phil Kessel. I didn't even realize I got that shot. That is so awesome to see. Good to see, too, the accurate Penguins jerseys actually in each of these Stanley Cup series. So, again, this one you can see so similar to what we have now. 3 different players with the cup. Then transitions to them getting ready for the team picture at the end. Some close-up shots there, different players. Again, I feel like a lot of these are quite slow, so this is real time. And I think, maybe it feels slower when you're watching so many of them, but it's something I noticed. I feel like definitely could be maybe better shots, faster shots, rather than having it drag on. And next to you guys, NHL 18. So slightly different. When you actually win it, instead of a close-up shot on your goalie winning, it was actually more of a long shot there of your goalie celebrating and then kind of everyone coming in there. Obviously, it's still similar, but definitely some of these shots have been changed. And I skipped ahead in this one, guys. There's a lot of just kind of meaningless shots, in my opinion, of them still celebrating. Haven't even gotten to the handshake line yet, but they actually kept this Stanley Cup celebration for a long time as well. 4 games, NHL 18, NHL 19, NHL 20, and NHL 21. That's obviously what a lot of us were complaining about, which is why we got a new Stanley Cup celebration in NHL 22. Although it wasn't drastically new, I would say, they changed some things but left a lot. So we're now in NHL 19 here, where St. Louis is winning the Stanley Cup, opposed to Washington. You can see them in the handshake line there with the Boston Bruins. Brain Shen there out to get the Conn Smythe Trophy. I think next year, of course, will be the back-to-back Tampa Bay Stanley Cups. Obviously, I could actually have the accurate teams win the Stanley Cups in these newer games because they all had playoff modes. As I was mentioning, in some of the older games, like NHL 07, for instance, I think NHL 8 as well, they didn't have a playoff mode, and they didn't even have a season mode. They only had dynasty mode. So I literally had to go in, pick a good team, grind through a dynasty, hope to make the playoffs, win the Stanley Cup. It was a grind, but as you guys can see here, Tampa Bay obviously winning that Stanley Cup. You have the Dallas Stars fans not being happy. There were some Tampa Bay fans there that also didn't look too happy, though, so that could have been fixed. But at least, you didn't have the opposing teams cheering like in those earlier games. Stamkos out here to get that Stanley Cup. You kind of compare that to what Dave Andreychuk, a former Tampa Bay Lightning captain, looked like in that first celebration. Obviously, Stammer here looks 100 times better. But again, for how old those games were, I really didn't think they were too terrible. He's going to hand it off to Hedman here. And I think in a little bit of multiverse magic here, I'm actually about to have Hedman give the Stanley Cup to himself as we transition to NHL 21. And then, of course, there's only a couple games left. So, yeah, right there, Hedman giving it off to Hedman for Tampa Bay's 2nd Stanley Cup. So, I'm sure you guys are used to this one, obviously. This is a very recent game. As if you guys watched any of my franchise modes last year, you would have seen this a bunch of times. A little bit of a humble brag there, I know. But that one skate with the second player, I think it is always way too long and dragged out. But there you have the pick. Obviously, that one is from an angle, whereas the new one, NHL 22, you guys will see, I'm sure you've seen it, is straight on. Now, NHL 22 Stanley Cup Celebration. This one I think I actually liked a lot better. Again, some small changes, but changes I think made sense. This shot here, kind of them celebrating ice level. Again, the straight on team pick at the end. I also like kind of seeing them in the line, cheering and stuff. So, again, you guys probably have seen this one quite a bit. We're going to speed through it a little bit here, but you guys can see the Avalanche, of course, winning the Stanley Cup against the Lightning. And so right here was the new shot I was talking about. You kind of just see them standing around, celebrating stuff, waiting for the trophies to come out. Very, realistic, I feel this shot is. Plus, I like how close it is on the guys. I think Tevin Tace here won the Conn Smythe, actually, in this one-game playoff sim I did. But, he's a good defenseman, so well-deserved. Game face there. I've seen worse. When I was doing this, I saw some absolutely terrible game faces. You guys might have noticed throughout this video. Then, of course, you have the Stanley Cup being brought out. And now, again, guys, I feel like you've probably seen this so many times, but if anyone watching hasn't, this is what it looks like. Just increase the speed there to 2 times. So, you got the captain coming out. Again, we got the fake Bettman. You got the skates through the carpet. Everyone's complained about that. Even in the new one, he skates around the carpet, but I think his skate still ends up in it. And again, at this point, it's, I think, exactly the same pretty much as the last few games. But again, there were, different shots leading up to this point. And then, of course, like I was mentioning, the final team pick shot is also different angles. So basically, similar Stanley Cup Celebration to the last 4 years, but they brought in some new angles and stuff like that to kind of freshen it up. Again, I do like the straight on. I think that looks a lot better. Now, next year, guys, I've actually got the NHL 23 Stanley Cup Celebration for you. Obviously, this is from the trailer. I love the sparklers going off. People complain about the confetti being unrealistic or whatever, but I think it's sick. It's a video game. It just kind of makes it look cooler in my opinion. So, of course, they had the Avs winning that one, but pretty cool, honestly. I would love to, watch the whole thing once the full game comes out. The fact you can actually pick who you give it to next is nice. Although I think, 2K, you could pick who you gave it to and actually skate around with it back in 2K10, which came out in 2009. And then just to kind of show you guys how far we've come, next up here we have NHL 94. Dude just takes the Stanley Cup out of his pocket or something, skates around with it. Yeah, so pretty crazy evolution, and can't wait to see what's next.